Orange North Cemetery, there's like a historic sign where the state of Indiana established it as like a historic cemetery in 1889,
Mm.
I think. And I've come to find out that I have ancestors that are both considered pioneers and settlers, which, like, the Indiana Historical Society, I think they deem that by like having ancestors before 1816 and then also between like 1816 and like 1840 something, I think. So the Bevoir family farm, or the Beauvoir, or the Bavar, or the Bever, or the Beaver. I don't know how it's pronounced. Even people in my own family can't seem to figure out how it's pronounced. Um, because there's like a lot of like, French country sort of shit going on. Um, but so that side is from my father's mother. And then I also have my father's father, which has bought some land with the Bevoirs, and like some foolery went on. Some gang, country backwood kind of stuff. As American traditional folkloric witches, um, we have like this heavy influence of like the red soul and connecting with our mighty dead, like the witches who have come before us, and our beloved dead, like our ancestors, right? And um I'm only now just discovering this whole side of my ancestry, which is exciting and gross and traumatic and horrific and really interesting. Um, I told you last time we talked that apparently there's like some loup-garous in the cemetery. So like that would be really cool to explore. Um, but like I would love to know what advice you might have for like witches of our tradition exploring their ancestry.
Starting from a place of research is usually where I start. I start in a very like academic headspace, right? Like I want to know the names, I want to know the dates. I won't remember the dates because my brain's not really capable of holding on to that. But I still want to kind of know what the dates are so that I can start to piece together the puzzle of what these people's lives might have looked like compared to what I've done with other research about ancestors. I love having a subscription to like an ancestry.com or one of those places where you can access genealogical information and go deep and like have access to those records too, that back it up of, here's the census data from, when my people lived in that area. Here's a newspaper article that's gotten attached to this person. Here's, death notices and birth certificates and, that kind of stuff. But also, I really love, you don't find it for most people. And it's kind of an interesting thing when you're talking about working with your ancestors and doing this sort of necromantic red soul work. It's hard to actually find the stories of these people's lives. So it's kind of one of the interesting things I think about how we document everything now so well and put so much of ourselves into public view on social media and on blogs and on our websites and like all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot more that we have written about us in this day and age than I think our ancestors ever experienced, like pretty
Mm-hmm.
much ever, unless they were a famous person, and most of us probably are related to somebody famous if you go back far enough in history just because of the way biology works. But but it's pretty far back, for a lot of us. And we've got not a great connection necessarily with those ancestors because we've lost the stories of the stories, the stories. So when we can find things like, I know you found a couple of newspaper articles talking about,
Yeah.
is it like obituaries even are great because it gives you an idea of sometimes it gives you an idea of what was important to these people, like to this specific person, or, who their closest friends were, who their family members were, not just names, but sometimes they include things like stories in obituaries. And that I think starts to put a personality together for people that are otherwise just names and dates. And a whisper in our blood, right? Like, and I think that whisper is there. I think that we can bring it out to anywhere between, just a regular talking voice and a shout. Like we can really get to know those ancestors, but it helps if we have some kind of personal link besides just knowing that a whole last name for a family line exists, right?
Right.
Um, and I've got similar experiences to you in the sense that there's a lot that's not known for me about my dad's biological family. My dad was adopted, so he was adopted within the family, but not within the biological family. It's crazy. It's some Oklahoma stuff, but like my dad always says that our family tree is a shrubbery, not a tree. That it's just really tangled, and thorny in some ways because you have this person died and got remarried and then they had more kids, or these people got divorced and then married new people and had more kids, or and my dad was adopted by his biological mother's stepsister. But because of the way all that works out, it makes my great grandfather actually my great grandfather, even through the through all this stuff. So there's a place where we get back into the stream of the blood lineage, but that
Right.
adopted lineage means a lot too. I think when you're trying to get in touch with those whispers and like the whispers that are in your blood, those ties, those little red threads that make up the whole big red thread. It's easy to like pull on one and have it break because you don't have enough information or you don't have enough connection.
Right.
But you can also tease one out and find where it goes.
And I think that's part of like when you go back, right? Like the lineage multiplies. Like you go back to like, for example, I'm exploring my father's side. Okay, well, he had two grandparents, right? And then so I can explore his mother or his father's side. And then that goes back. And then I can explore his mother's mother or his mother's father's side. Like it's so much.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
This is a family tree that goes out 10 generations. So the circle in the very middle is you. And then this is just biological, right? So this is just the biological ancestors. The next circle is divided into two, for your bio mom and bio dad. And then the next circle is into four. It goes out 10 generations. And by the time you get to this, you can barely see the delineations because there's so many. There's just so many. So even just going 10 generations back, which really, in the scheme of things, isn't that far back in history.
Right.
10 generations ago is about, like, depending on what generation you are, right? But it's about, like, for me, 10 generations back is just before the Revolutionary War here in the United States. Because at the 8 generations back mark, that was the first ancestor that I know of that was born in a particular line here um, on this continent.
Been doing so much research that like, and I'm not a numbers person or a math person, so like all the numbers get like discombobulated in my head. But I know that I have an ancestor that was in like the Battle of 1812, you know? Um, and I know that on my father's side, like the Beauvoir side, there's like Union Civil War history, but the side has like Confederate. Yeah.
Yeah, so truthfully, most of my family, because when all the different people that were not born here came into the country, like those initial people within my family line that immigrated here one way or another, they almost all went south. So they came in through Virginia and the Carolinas mostly,
Yeah, I have some of that too.
and then
Like
stayed south.
Maryland and Virginia, because like those were both, I guess, Catholic colonies.
Yeah,
So
that
yeah.
that tracks. I like that sounds right. I don't know. My people were all Protestant, it seems like. So
Oh, almost I feel like when it comes to red soul work, you really have to like just look at one thread at a
at a
time,
time.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, because like I have learned that like when I look at the bigger picture, especially from a family that like I really don't know these people. you know. I'm only just now getting to know some of their descendants that are of my blood.
Right.
Um, but like looking at my mother's father's side or my father's mother's side or my father's father's side, like those are two very different stories. And then you
Very.
go back further and that's like four very different stories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's a phrase that one of my friends uses all the time when we're talking about ancestry and genealogy and working with ancestors. And ancestor work's really important in her tradition as well. Um, and that is, I am the product of a thousand loves. Which I really like. I think that that's very romantic and beautiful. I also know on some level that not all of the people who joined together in one way or the other to create new life that eventually led to me, probably not all of those people actually loved each other. And
hey, well,
horrifically, there's probably a lot in there where, you know, not everybody was choosing to participate
yeah,
in the process, you know.
right. And even as far back as like my great grandmother Bevoir, um, my father's grandmother. So yeah, my great grandmother. I got a picture of my great grandparents recently that looking at it really like sent me into a whole emotional state. Um, and so I've seen some pictures of her because I was given a bunch of family photos from my father's widow, and in every single photo looks so depressed. Like she looks so sad. And she was like very country. On like the family farms Facebook page, because they have that, because some of these tobacco barns are now like white people boho wedding venues, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, and I say like white people boho wedding venues because like I'm talking about the type of people that get married in places like that. Okay.
Mhm.
So, but like
Yeah.
people talk about great grandma, how she like preferred the company of her chickens and she would bring farm animals in the house. And also, apparently, she was really mean to her husband, partially deaf. And also, maybe, but their marriage, from what I've understood, there's a term for it. It's like a marriage of habitat or something.
Hmm.
I forget how they called it, but basically it's like they got married because of like circumstances and because of land. And um yeah.
Yeah,
So
and sometimes it's because it just made sense, you know, and that like the all of the traditional gender roles were so prominent in our ancestors' lives, like really up until about the boomer generation, you know,
uh,
like really everything before that. And it was, you know, you start looking at it would be hard for a man to live a comfortable life without having a partner to help because he was going to be expected to work out of the home, outside of the home, or on the
especially with
farm.
like farming
Yeah,
communities. Yeah.
it's just an unreal amount of labor that,
Yeah.
you know, our labor has changed so significantly that it's hard for us to really put ourselves in that mindset. And like, you know, simultaneously, folks socialized as women were going to need to be married to somebody who was providing
Yeah.
for them as well. Like that is a thing that's happened all the way through history. But
But that's still a thing even in my like immediate family.
yeah,
Like on my mother's side, like I come from a lot of very educated women, but like you still should get married at like 19 or 20, you
yeah,
know? Like you pursue your education to fall back on.
yes. Yes, that was, I would say that's very much the philosophy that my family also had. Like there are,
It's also very harrowing too when I'm going back because a lot of what I've been looking at has been through Find a Grave, which is a wonderful free resource.
mhm,
And you can find the burial plots of people, and if they have uploaded obituaries, you can read them or newspaper articles, and you can find their spouses and their siblings and their children. It's a wonderful resource. So check out Find a Grave. Um, but when you go back, like the women have so much less information than the men. And the feminist in me just like recoils because, like, when I'm looking at the women's information, it's like wife of so and so, mother of so and so, and then that's about it.
Daughter of so and so. You forgot the
Yeah.
daughter of
Yeah.
yeah.
Daughter too. But that's
No,
about it.
but yeah.
Tools to take into the cemetery. So, like,
Yeah.
tomorrow, I have like a bag. I had a bag that was custom made from a business called the Crazy Rat Lady. And it's like a craft bag that's really intended for like crochet and sewing supplies, but I use it as my witch on the go bag.
Nice.
And so I've been packing that tonight to bring with me tomorrow. Um, and in general, for me, when I go to the cemetery, because Crown Hill, I go there fairly routinely. Like, I love Crown Hill Cemetery here in Indy. Um, and like typically I bring like some water and some whiskey and some coins and some rice and some paper and a pen. And I also usually bring some sort of like head covering, which I cover my hair most of the time anyway through like wigs, hair pieces, or extensions, or scarves. But like when I go to a cemetery, I definitely prefer to use some sort of like scarf. It's going to be hot tomorrow. It's going to be like 82. So I'm probably not going to pack like a pashmina because like that might be too hot. But I do have some like silk head scarves that I've packed, like some incense and like some protection oil. And I'm also going to be wearing like this horned moon
Yeah.
pentacle that I got. Um, what do you think of that?
Think what you're bringing already is very well thought out, and covers really all the bases. You've got offerings, you've got protective talismans, you've got like other protective things in place, you've got
I feel like I need to bring
divination
like
methods.
tobacco.
Yeah, would have tobacco on my list. Like tobacco is a thing. But the water, whiskey, tobacco, and incense, like I'll probably have, some incense sticks. That way we're not trying to light charcoals and potentially start a fire. Not trying to make that happen. But um, I sometimes smoke is nice. Some ancestors really like that and respond well to it. Um, I think that's great. I personally would, I'm going to bring a pendulum. I'm going to bring either stones or, like if you use casting lots or throwing bones, like I have a set of.
A deck of playing cards and tarot cards,
Mhm.
and also my witch cords.
Yes, that was the other thing I was going to say is, rope and feathers, or if you don't have witch cords, right? But if witch cords were a part of somebody's dedication or initiation, I would definitely wear those because those connect you to your group of people. Yeah,
Yeah,
a different aspect of our red soul and to living members of those traditions that we hold cords for. So we walk with our siblings in that way and have their protection around us, like literally wrapped around us when we wear them in those spaces. But if a person, like, just because I know this is part of a whole project and sharing some information about
yeah,
what somebody might bring, if they didn't have that, like maybe they don't have that for themselves because that's not something that they did for their self initiation and they're not part of a group, I would make something like rope and feathers, which is a witch's ladder that includes some knots and some feathers in it that you can undo, in order to release massive protection because you've put so much energy into making those.
yeah,
And so you can kind of unwind that to give yourself protection. And a lot of times, just wearing it around your neck or around your waist, over an arm or something, is enough for spirits that might want to decide to get frisky and mess with you, just to reconsider that. They just kind of reconsider their stance and just let you be. Like one of the things that I'll bring is Florida water because I find it, if you feel like as you're leaving the space that something's trying to attach and come home with you. Florida water is just a really nice way to my high priestess and initiator always had us use she said like she was not particular about the kind of perfume you use, but she always wanted us to have perfume on hand when we were doing that kind of work so that you could put some on your palms, on the soles of your feet, and on the back of your neck. um, just as that sort of that five spot of these are the main connection points, these are some of the main connection points, and to be able to go. I later, when I started learning it, because it was later in my practice that I learned about Florida water, and I realized that what she was doing with just perfume was kind of I don't know, like telephone game on the Florida water, right? Like that the same principles that applied that make Florida water, which is, an alcohol base, because perfumes are usually, with those particular floral notes in it. It has those essential oils that go into Florida water have some like really protective elements. Um, and I would just, if you were going to use something else, I would pick just a different perfume that has notes that you associate with some of those, that cleansing, that boundary enforcing.
So let's talk about like different types of dirt within the cemetery. There's like uh entryway dirt that we talked about last time we talked. There's like
Mhm.
crossroad dirt. There's like dirt from like individual graves. So like, can you break that down for the sake of the video?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, the dirt from the entry, like dirt from anywhere within the cemetery can be called graveyard dirt. Um, but I personally, there are some cemeteries that I where I have family buried where I've collected just sort of dirt from the general area. Um, Again, maybe like if there is a single point of entry, sort of that gate, that liminal space, as you're coming in to the cemetery, which is its own kind of liminal space, right? Um, so if I was wanting to connect with the whole cemetery and with the whole like family of ancestors that's there at that cemetery. And I have a couple of cemeteries like this one for you where, I've got a whole lot of people buried there. Um, I would use that for just sort of connecting with the group as a whole. Um, I usually only take dirt from a specific grave if I feel like I've gained permission, whether if it's an ancestor that I knew personally, like a grandparent or a great grandparent that I had the honor of actually getting to know and meeting and knowing something about, and I feel like that they would be okay with me taking it. But
Mhm.
then also getting that like, I don't know, that spiritual sense of they said yes for this specific instance. Um, that's when I take from a specific grave. Now I've done that for ancestors that I haven't known, and even for like I blessed years and years ago. I remember going with Natalie in the middle of the night to a cemetery near where we lived in Monrovia. Um, and
Spooky,
it was
not Ambrosia.
it was, yeah, because we're talking about a little country. It wasn't even like Monrovia proper. It was outside of Monrovia in the sticks. Like actually like not a direct ancestor, but there's like we'll call him like a 10th cousin, like a very distantly removed cousin, or uncle or something in that cemetery of mine. But I was being very drawn to bless um, ancestor water on a pair of graves that were not people that I knew. And so I went through a series of divinations and asked for their permission to bless that that ghost water on their graves. And so that was, for a period of time before midnight and a period of time after midnight on like the full moon in Samhain season was when I had done that. So that's you know, it's kind of a similar process in terms of that asking for permission, bringing something to do divinations with, just quick, simple yes, no, maybe kinds of answers like yes, no,
Yeah.
ask more detailed questions.
So in my crane bag, I have a flip coin, like a
Yeah.
yes no sort of flip coin. Um, Another goal of mine when going to the cemetery is to I would like to get some dirt from the gate. I would like to get some dirt from the crossroads because like the last time I went was at the funeral and I only got rocks from the gravel. So I want to get like dirt. So I'm also bringing like little hand shovels with me. And then I would love to like find some fallen sticks, like branches, so I could take them home and make tree wards out of them for like witch flight.
Yeah.
So like that's a goal. And then also just like taking photographs of like the different graves for me to fall down a rabbit hole later, you
Hmm.
know? I'm trying to also like tell myself that like if I need to have that moment, that like I am in a space
Yeah.
where I can, you know?
Yes. Yeah,
Because like my friends and it's an okay space to do that.
it is. It is a perfectly valid and safe space to do that. In a cemetery with friends who have your back and know that you're dealing with complicated feelings. Um, yeah, and even not knowing those things, right? It's a safe and good space to do that. And it's also, if you get there and you feel more like giggling than crying and it's, just not that kind of vibe, that's okay too. Ancestors lived some grim lives. Like
Yeah.
they were hard and but it doesn't mean that they were entirely without joy, entirely without levity, So you never know. One or more of them could be just so tickled that you're there that you feel literally tickled about it, like that you're picking up on, happy vibes and silly vibes and that kind of stuff, and that's not inappropriate either.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because we're talking about people who led long, sometimes very full lives and had a whole range of experiences, and they can choose to share any of that with us.
Well, and I think it's so like I don't know the word, but it's so almost transformative and like harrowing to think about when I'm looking into my ancestors from like the Cook side, they came from like Louisville, Kentucky, and like they crossed the Ohio River.
Yeah.
Um, and like one of them crossed a river with a very young child. And I think about like I try to put myself in like her shoes and like what that must have been like. Like, first of all, why come to Indiana? Like, why leave Kentucky?
Hmm.
And the reason must have been important enough to like have to cross the river with your infant child.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't know, like thinking about these people as more than just numbers and genealogy, but like these are real people, of course, with like very real stories. Because sometimes that's easy to forget, you know?
Yeah.
But like when you remember that, like, yeah, these were people that lived real lives and had real trials and struggles. Like, I can't imagine crossing the Ohio River with an infant.
Yeah. Yeah, on in what? Like was it I'm guessing that they were ferries back then that went across the river a lot. I mean, in fact, where I live, I'm on the
I think
Ohio
they're,
River.
yeah, I think they were rafts.
Yeah, but probably with a most likely with a ferryman, somebody that was at least somewhat experienced in taking people back and forth. Um, but at the same time, perilous, right? Like it is still a dangerous proposition to do that. It is a wide river, I look at it every day. And it's
Well,
wider in
and then
Louisville than it is
coming,
where I am.
yeah. And then coming into Indiana, that was like, you know, very much stolen land from like the Miami and other native peoples. At the time, it wasn't considered settled. So, like, you're moving into like this very densely wooded area on the promise of what? Good soil for farming. Because, like, from what I've read, Southern Indiana, a lot of like immigrants from Louisville came up because they were promised that like they would have better farming further north, that the soil was richer. And that's why like Southern Indiana specifically like was settled out as it was, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely trying to get into the head space of our pioneer and settler ancestors. And, you know, it's interesting because there's always the question of what propelled them to leave where they were. Was it just terrible? What were the factors that caused them to want to leave or to even be willing to leave where they were, where they had support, where they had family, where they had, you know, that kind of access, to go somewhere where they absolutely didn't and where nothing was guaranteed. I mean, it's a huge risk, just a
I mean,
giant risk.
when I flipped,
There are some stories where you start to get into it and you start to figure out the landscape of what was actually happening in a certain person's life, or a couple, or like that nuclear family, what was happening, and where you go, yeesh, because you're like, that was not a good person. That one, direct, I'm a direct descendant of that person, and I wouldn't want to be in the same room with them, much
yeah,
less have a part of them as part of my own body. And we don't get to choose that. That's one of the hard things about family, is that those blood families, you have no choice in who you're related to. Um, we've chosen family. As witches, that's something we very much do, is choose who our people are going to be. But sometimes there's a reckoning of just like looking at where we came from and the horrors that our ancestors, any given one of them or as a group, may have committed and been part of. I mean, you were just talking about, knowing that like your ancestors were coming here before statehood, before it was considered settled, before this was land that any kind of treaties or negotiations or deals had been made about, and talking about the validity of those deals is a whole other, like, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. And I'm pretty sure we stand on the same side. It's like
yeah. And I recently,
hashtag land back, you know?
yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
that's also harrowing and
Yeah.
complicated, right? And I recently filmed a video that's like unlisted right now. It's on my Patreon. Um, Pretty much everything I film, I put on Patreon first, but also some things I film, I like request a vibe check from like my friends or trusted peers first, because I'm like, there are some things that I just need a vibe check for.
Yeah.
And recently, so I made a TikTok talking about my French ass colonizing family, and how I found out, a bunch of things. And someone commented on it and they were like, what are you doing to like repair that wound? Not in those exact words, but similar. And like at first, I felt kind of weird because like the person commenting only just now came to my page and only just now leaves a comment.
Right.
And there's no context about this person. They're just like a username. I have no idea. Like, are you a Miami person? Are you a person of color? Are you like a blue haired septum ring white girl with like white guilt? Like,
Right.
how long have you been following this story? Because I just found out about this recently.
Right.
Um, but the
And
bigger picture is that comment opens this up for like a much bigger conversation, because like how do we as people, as white people, as mixed race people with white in us, like how do we explore that? And I think that the first way to do so is by learning the history, because like it's really easy, I think, for a lot of white people to be like, oh, colonization was horrible and like what happened in this country was terrible, but then just like leave it there, right?
mhm.
It's another thing to like do your own ancestry research and learn, oh, my ancestor John Bevoir in 18 whatever XYZ,
Mhm.
that takes it to a whole other degree of like accountability
Mhm.
of like, yeah, what white people did in this country was horrific. And my ancestors played this specific role. And then from there, there's like unpacking that and like understanding that most of Indianapolis, you know, was Miami land. So, like, even if I didn't have this ancestry, I'm still living on stolen land. And prior to connecting with my father's side of my red soul, I struggled with that too as like a second generation American because I'm like, you know, on my mother's side, we came here fairly recently, but we're still on stolen land, right? Like we still,
Benefit from that.
yeah,
Yeah,
we still need to acknowledge that.
right.
But then like connecting with my father's side, it's like, oh no, we played a part in that. And
Yeah,
so I think that's the first step is like understanding the history, right? Because there is no taking it back. There is no making it better. I don't have even any land to give if I had it. And that's so complicated, you know?
it is. It is. It's really complicated. Um, yeah, I mean, Jasmine, I don't even know what I could say to add to what you just said because you hit all the nails right on the head. Like it is complicated and our histories are complicated and where we are in our own lives and how we're benefiting from those privileges um, are complicated and not clear cut and not easy to find. I think part of it too, I think that we're very solution focused as a culture and a society right now, right? Like you show me the problem, now I got to find a solution. Like that's the agreement that we all seem to feel pretty deeply is if there's a
Yeah,
problem, then I'm responsible and I need to fix it.
yeah,
Except that it's really challenging to figure out what I think it's really challenging to figure out what is my responsibility in this and how can I even help to make it better. I want to, and I think exactly what you said, that starting with research and like educating yourself and looking clear-eyed at what roles your family members have played is the first step, and not trying to like sugarcoat that for yourself, but also not trying to just use it as a stick to beat yourself with, because that's not helping anybody. Um, and then we can come to the table with, basically hands to volunteer to help make things better, and to be able to hear um, yeah, what the cultures that we have wronged are saying needs to happen.
yeah. And it opened the door to like have that conversation, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Core or Natalie or Nora are not able to join you. And so you're coming out on your own. If you're going to get there a little bit before me, maybe just find the nearest grocery store and hang out in the parking lot at the grocery store, and I can meet you there, and then we can go together to the cemetery. That way, you're not just out on a back road by yourself.
yeah, that's a really good idea. We really got to take some pictures of
I agree.
us,
I agree.
just to be like, we were here, this happened,
Yeah.
you know, and hopefully, like me sharing all of this will help other people because I've had a lot of like people, right, through content creation or through, um, just being affiliated with like American traditional witchcraft who want to connect to their ancestors but are afraid to or are nervous or how do I connect to ancestry that is so challenging and like in the past I haven't really known the answers because like I'm an immigrant child but now I'm like oh so I'm not actually like I mean I
Yeah.
am but also my blood runs deep here and so hopefully this project will be able to help people be like, you know,
Yeah. I think so. I think it's really needed, truthfully. And I think I wouldn't discount your experience, even before this moment, sort of where your dad's family has materialized in your life and all of the ancestry and all of that kind of stuff. The experience of being, the child of an immigrant and having that experience of being like in this very sort of foreign place, um, as far as like most of the family that you know of ancestrally. Um, I think those are a lot of the questions that people have is how do I even navigate this when I have a complicated background? Like I get a lot of questions around the adoption issue because I'm somebody that's actually, I wasn't the one that was adopted, my dad was, but it impacts me too, and it impacts my relationship with my ancestors, and this sort of like the holes of what I know about them. And I think that those are really important things to at least be addressing and trying to come up with some solutions to. So you probably have great advice that you don't even realize that you've got in there. Maybe we should think about collaborating on a book for connecting with ancestors when there's gaps.
I love that. Yeah. I am already in the works of like I would love to put together like a Midwest witches grimoire,
Oh
you
yeah,
know. That's really fun.
that would be
Um
cool.
but yeah, I think that the work that I'm doing and that we'll be doing tomorrow is just like a little small piece of like this is what it looks like, you
Hmm.
know. Because I've
Yeah.
been told by other people before, like, girl, maybe you shouldn't share all of this so publicly, like while you're still processing. And I get what they're saying because I'm messy and like, sure, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's not a good look. But I'm going to anyway. Because I feel like that like authentic aspect of like this is processing all of this. I don't know. I think it offers,
I think it
yeah,
does too. I get what you're saying. If I'm hearing you right, what I'm hearing you say is that it offers people a chance to see what it might look like and how it might not be this easy textbook, follow this little primrose path experience, that it can
yeah,
be messy, that it is
yeah,
complicated. And I think people do need to see that because I don't think it's doing anybody any service to only show them the photo ready finale, you know? Um, the only caution that I would ever give is that like maybe as you're editing things together, don't share the full names of because I feel like those are tags into your energy that could be used in magical ways.
yeah.
Um, names are important, and so if people know those sort of legal names of your ancestors, they're one step closer to being able to tap into your energy in either a real world physical sense or a spiritual magical sense. And you probably don't want, if they're looking that hard to do it, you probably don't want them tapping in to either of those things. So that would be my only caution, but it's
No,
your
that's
family and
true.
your choices. So, you decide.
Which tapping into my energy, you must be a sadist or something, like,
Right? Who knows what
or
they're
a
into?
masochist. I've heard. But yeah, this was great. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I have to get going.
Yeah,
Um, but I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and thank you so much. And um, yeah,
I'm looking forward to it too. I'll see you then.
okay. Bye. And let
Bye.
me know what you think of that video whenever you get a
Yes.
chance.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out and just give me a vibe check and let me know that I don't sound like a complete idiot or insensitive, you know?
I'm sure that you don't, just knowing you, I'm sure that you don't to sound like either of those things, but I will definitely give it a watch and let you know, just to help set your mind at ease.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. All right,
Okay.
I'll see you
Bye.
tomorrow. Bye.
Hi, this is Conjure Cutie, aka Core. I'm here with Jazz, and we are at Orange North Cemetery, Indiana. We came here because this cemetery specifically has a blood connection to Jazz for the Red Soul. Came down here with Jazz because I didn't want her to come here alone. This area is very outdated with their way of thinking. They're not too kind to people who are different. So I honestly wouldn't even feel good coming here by myself. I would want someone to come with me as well. So I feel like us coming here together kind of gives us more strength in numbers, and we can kind of help each other out. Down here was very rural, very very rural, and it was very 65 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, 60, 30, 50, 30. So that was fun. It was like a little ride. We finally got here at the cemetery. I feel like it's very active. I feel like, you know, there is a connection that Jazz just naturally has here. I also feel like a lot of people still come here and talk to their family members that are buried here. Jazz and I came here to do some work. I brought some tarot cards as well as some oracle cards. I also have some incense. What I like to do when working with the dead and necromancy specifically, you definitely want to make sure you have coverage on your head, but this came to me, so this is not from any books, but my new way of talking to the dead is I have some scissors and I'll stab them into the ground and I'll open them while they're in the ground, and that will help open up my communication with the spirits of the land that are buried here. And when I want to close that connection, I close it and pull it out of the ground. So I kind of talk to them that way through using different divination methods, whether it be a pendulum or my tarot deck or an oracle deck, or even just writing in a notebook, you know. So that's kind of what I like to do when I go to cemeteries in general. I also brought offerings of honey. I brought candles so we can leave little memorials if we need to. I brought a shovel. I brought some, you know, jars to put the dirt in if we need to do dirt collection. Jazz brought some coins. We are prepped for doing the work here. Like, I came here for you. So my goal is for you to get more connected with your red soul in general. And I want you to find more about yourself, because I've found more about myself. So I want us to, you know, be on the same page. Like, that's really my goal. No! Yeah.
Like the storm in the heart of a witch who's already been scorned. The demons whisper and tighten the chains, inciting wisdom to be born from pain. You'll stay in hell.
So we just finished at Orange North Cemetery. We are both very hot. We have been out here for hours.
It's hot as hell.
It was really good coming back here, but I'm happy to be on my way home.
Yeah.
When we first got here, there was like some sort of burial going on, which is like interesting because the cemetery is like an ancestral or family plot, which means that like I'm related somehow to the person that was like being buried over there. But I have no idea who they are. So that's fun.
Yeah.
And it was great seeing Lorelai.
It was. It was so great seeing her and getting to meet her finally. She's so sweet.
And we collected some dirt from the crossroads and from the gate and from the mound.
We did.
And we did some work by the mound.
Mm-hmm. And we found some interesting plants by the dirt and mounds.
And we're both very hot. So this is our check-in after. And yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.